Hey guys, it's Zach. Today I want to talk about Splitpushers. So, in my Assassin video, I talked about how Assassins are there to facilitate the ADC. The game is based around and balanced around the ADC being able to take objectives, and everyone else is either defending their own ADC or pressuring the enemies. And this doesn't just mean ADC, by the way. This could be your AP hypercarry, like Cassiopeia or Jinx, that can take objectives. You could even technically have a Brand or a Zyra in this slot. But there is a carry that kills objectives, especially like towers, that everyone else is focused on stopping because otherwise they win the game. So what does a split pusher do if not take towers? Well, they take towers, but not in the way that you expect, or not in the way that you expect of a carry. Split pushers do something entirely different, where they take towers on their own in the face of enemy characters, but not with their team. Alawi, Trinimir, Yorick, Scion with Hullbreaker, Jax, Fiora, Riven, Irelia, right? All these characters want to take an extended fight where they get to pick the terms of the fight, preferably without many other characters either on their own or on the enemy team, win the fight, and then use that single win to push their advantage as hard as possible. They win the fight because their champion is better at it, and because they get to pick the terms. They get to pick the terms because they are better at pushing early and mid game than you are, and because you have to respond to them or they'll take a tower. The champions that can do this best are not just split pushers, because, LeBlanc can split push, Ryze can split push into the right team, Tristana can split push, but they're not the class of champs I'm talking about. I'm talking about a specific class called Brawlers. They're faster than Juggernauts, but they don't want to team fight as well as divers, and in return, they're even better at taking these fights that are long and frustrating, and most other champs just can't even deal with. They also typically have a lot of skill expression, in that they have a lot of tools to make your fight better than it should otherwise be. This also makes them even more frustrating to play against often. What do you mean Riven got her second shield up before I even got to, press my first full rotation? What do you mean she CC'd me 3 times? That's bullshit, right? Well, it's not bullshit. The way the characters win the game isn't bullshit. The way they beat you maybe feels bullshit. These brawlers win the game through tempo. I referenced this already, but they win the game by forcing you to respond to their play. For people who may not know, that is what tempo means in League of Legends. Doing something that your opponent has to respond to. Brawlers do that because their resources to push waves are low, they push waves quickly, and if you ignore them, they can take towers. Why do they fall off then? Well, because they don't have the same multiplicative scaling that ADCs do. In an item video I made, I talked about how ADCs are the best class at multiplying their damage. That's because they multiply off attack damage, attack speed, and something unique to their characters, which is crit chance. The closest we get to that for, mages is maybe just having a base ratio so good that when you get a bunch of attack speed or move speed or whatever, you're able to do something crazy with it, like Azir. But most of the time, there's the specific role of attack damage carry that is able to win the game by doing a unique amount of damage to other champions without spending resources. Bruisers can do that from the start of the game, but in return, they don't get to scale their damage the same way that other characters do. Or, if they do choose to scale their damage, they're so squishy that they'll die before they can get it off. They don't have the range. In return, Bruisers get to do what ADCs do before ADCs can do it, which means you have to respond to them, right? Bruisers are essentially an ADC level force on the map, but they cover their own tank stats. They cover their own mobility. As a result, most champions cannot answer a Brawler 1v1. That means that the Brawler gets tempo. You have to either send other people, or you have to manage your ability to wave clear by sending your best wave clearer. You typically don't want trapped under turret against a Brawler who might be able to just kill them. Brawlers win fights, then they push, then they win fights again, then they win lane, then they beat multiple people in a fight, and then you fall over. If you don't, and Brawlers don't get to take turrets, they lose the game. Brawlers need to be present at all times on the map to win. So what that looks like sometimes means Brawlers die a lot. You ever seen the 0-6 Jax push into the enemy's second turret and then fight the guy who comes to stop him? Well, they don't have another choice. Technically, yeah, that's probably inting, but that's an exaggeration, but it's true. Brawlers absolutely have to go and try to do things, because they are going to fall off, and they do have the ability to constantly gain tempo. So, as a Brawler player, you should always be looking to be on the map. You need to pay a lot of attention to when you are not on the map. You need to be saying, oh god, I need to get my ass on the map right now. I need to be able to be seen. I need to be responded to. I'm going to be annoying, I'm going to be frustrating, and I'm going to be scary as hell. If you're not doing that, even when you're 0-6, then you're going to lose because your champion doesn't exist in team fights like team fight divers do, right? Wukong, Diana, Xin Zhao, they're maybe really weak at 4 or 5 items, but they will always have one button that has to be responded to by the enemy team or their ADC will die. Brawlers don't necessarily do that. They have a kit that needs to be responded to, but it's not too hard to respond to when you have all these resources. Brawlers can't really have a defensive mechanic that lets them dive into everybody. This is also the reason I probably wouldn't put Gwen in the Brawler category. Gwen is a teamfight diver. She just doesn't have CC to facilitate it. Thank you, Gwen W. Gwen is immune. So, Brawlers are champions that appear on the map constantly, take fights constantly, win fights, push towers, and take them. Brawlers fall off late game, and in return, to win the game as a Brawler, you need to be on the map all the time. So, how do you otherwise win the game? Well, if you're on the map all the time, and they're answering you, then they're not getting the resources they want to be getting. They're not contesting your ADC or your mage or your, I don't know, Viego or whatever off their resources. Your hypercarries are playing the game, and theirs aren't as well, right? You have 2 people stopping you at a tower. You have 3 people for 10 seconds killing you, but they're burning flash and ultis, and they're going to be much weaker in fights in the next 60 seconds to 2 minutes. 5 minutes. There's no flashes, there's no whatever, right? They're stuck in one side of the map, so your team moves to the other and takes an objective. Your death has gotten Dragon. Any jungler will tell you that's worth it. So, to beat a Brawler, you need to stop them from getting tempo. If you can push on their own, that's great. If you can just kill them 1v1, that's amazing, and there are champions who are really good at that. If you can stymie them, stifle their ability to push. Syndra and Cassiopeia are mages that are notoriously difficult for Brawlers to dive because they just say no. They have 1 or 2 buttons that just say no. They can also buy Zhonya's. They can pressure you with very high single target damage. Great. So you can draft against a Brawler. You can also build against a Brawler. Most of the time they do only one type of damage, and counter items really hurt them. Trinamir fucking hates Ninja Tabis. Plated Seal Caps, sorry. Okay. So they're pretty solved, right? Why don't they win games? Well, because people don't want to acknowledge that Brawlers aren't playing the same game of League of Legends. As a Brawler player, you are trying to be on the map at all times, and sometimes you're just going to push up, and the enemy team is going to respond. Your team has to then respond to what the enemy team has done correctly. If the enemy team has responded to you in a way that you no longer have options, if they have flanked you, if they have, sent multiple people to you, if their strongest champion has come bot when you're 0-6 and burned all their sums and all your gold is on the other side of the map pushing something, your team needs to know that, and they need to respond to it. The enemy team has become weaker because they are responding to your role. So the ally team needs to see that the enemy team is weaker and capitalize. Even if it's just invading the enemy jungle or suddenly getting prio so an ADC can reset and buy their LDR, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal, and they wouldn't be able to do it if you didn't do what you did, as long as you did it right. But you aren't trying to win the game the normal way, because you're trying to pull people away. You're trying to make an unfair fight for the ADCs, kind of in the same way Assassins do. You're doing it totally differently. You're focusing on the towers instead of the champions, but it's the same idea, right? You are getting more resources than they are because you have tempo. You're pushing a tower they don't want to push, and then you're winning the game as a result. Why does it just keep snapping off my character? I don't like that. Thank you, recording. Great. So, as a Brawler, when you win the game through tempo. As a Brawler, when you lose the game through your team not taking tempo. And yeah, that's it. It's really frustrating, and this gets into why top lane can feel like an island sometimes. Your role doesn't scale into late game, which means if I'm looking at a Jax and I'm looking at a Sivir, man, I really care about the Sivir more. I'm sorry. There's a huge difference between these champions. And every, jungler who is playing to a win condition is already aware of it. I really don't either. You're not the win con, and you're not the focus. In fact, you're something that nobody wants to pay attention to. The enemy team doesn't want to pay attention to you. They'll be happy to shut you down, but, they know you're not the win con, right? So, you are forced to play this game that's notice me, pay attention to me, I'm stronger than you, I matter, and you do until you don't, and there's nothing you can do to change the fact that that window comes up later in the game. It's on your team to turn your advantages into their advantages. And if the team doesn't do it properly, that makes it really, really frustrating to play as one of these champions, because sometimes the enemy team just sends 3 people at you. You're not allowed to play with your team. It's just the wrong way to play the game, and you're not going to do anything if you do. So you walk to a side lane, get 3v1'd, and your team doesn't get a turret, and you say, guys, what the hell? And then you get really, really frustrated. You lose the game after winning lane, and you say, how do I win? There isn't a way to stop that. Instead, what you have to do is move towards the fundamentals of the game. If you're dying 3v1 and your team isn't getting anything, is it their mistake? Well, maybe. But what could you have done to not die? If I watch TF Blade play in gold, he's probably going to go like 20-0. He has accrued gold better than any one of us is ever going to. You, me, anyone watching this video. He also has pushed waves better than you have. The enemy player probably has less gold. He has managed the fact that he is on the map more than you have. He has timed his recalls better. So that's what you need to look at when you're looking at how to win on a brawler. If you already know, I need to be pushing towers. If you feel like you're on the map all the time, if you feel like 3 people are killing you and there's nothing your team is doing about it, where is my team when I'm pushing that first wave? The skill in brawlers, the biggest skill, besides obviously playing your champ correctly, if you're like Riven or Fiora or whatever, and you have a really high skill cap, is to understand when you are making a mistake by pushing too hard. Look at your character, and look at the enemy champions, see how they move and when they're allowed to move. Your team may not give tempo at all. They may simply just not push. They may not click towers. They may just go to fight all the time. They may respond to the enemy's tempo. You have to create as much tempo as possible. You have to do that by having a lot of gold, but you also have to do that by not dying. If you die, you are off the map longer than if anything else happens. Look at where the enemy team is going. If you're in the replay and you're realizing, I haven't on my own vision seen a champion in 5 minutes, you need to change the way that you're looking at the enemy champions. Use your tempo to move into the jungle. Contest a champion, see where they are once, put a ward down, then go back into your lane, right? This is expanding your influence, and this is moving away from the sphere of brawlers, but this is also how you solo carry games. You need information. If you gain that information, you can acquire tempo more easily. You can push a significantly safer wave for yourself, right? You can be in a place where you're just not going to die to that one guy who just went to the other side of the map. You can get all this like unfair tempo by simply knowing this is what the enemy wants to do. You can also do that by identifying which characters can fight you and how to avoid them. If you're already 0-3 and there's a Syndra on the enemy team, she is going to walk into a side lane and kill you. So you need to figure out how to be somewhere Syndra isn't. If you go to one lane, push 2 waves, reset, and then immediately show on the other wave. Even better, TP to the wave on the other side of the map. If someone's there, that's fine. You're still pressuring. If someone on your team is there and their team isn't, you now take the tower far faster than whatever the hell your teammate was going to do, right? Like, what's Vigar going to do when he gets to a turret? Hit it 3 times and then be forced to back off instantly or he dies? You're Jax. Go hit the turret 20 times. Die for it. In short, you need to play for tempo the entire time. Don't worry about the scoreboard. Don't worry about what your team says. Do everything you can to optimize your own gameplay. You have locked in a brawler knowing eventually you will lose the game if you do not try to win the game. Whether that means your team didn't perform, you didn't perform, or a whole bunch of bad luck happened and people just walked to the right places, all of that can be mitigated and it's on you to figure that out. Keep the idea of tempo in mind when you figure out how to win as a brawler. Open up your replay, see when you're not on the map and what you could have done to mitigate that. Were my recalls not good? If my recalls weren't good, is it because I didn't conserve my resources in the lane? Was I looking at the enemy champion instead of at the tower? Look at the tower, make the enemy champion put themselves between you and the tower and punish it. That's it. See ya.